Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Haribo, Haribo, Gaur, Haribo, Nitai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Gaur, Haribo. Jayam Vishnupad, Paramahansa Parivajakacharya, Asto Tadasata Shishimad, ISKCON Founder Acharya, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Nityalila Pravistom, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki, Gaur Pramanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Volume 1, page 143, An Unknown Friend. Throughout the years of India's political struggles, Abhay had never lost his desire to propagate Krishna consciousness. He had seen how promises of unity and independence had brought mostly higher prices and civic mismanagement. He had seen neighborhoods where Indians had lived peacefully for generations erupt in hatred and rioting in the wake of British and Indian diplomatic manipulations. It was as Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had described it. Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects, cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men guided by another blind man miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men led by another materially attached man are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. Famous verse, Nate Vidusva Artagatimi Vishnu. The Vaishnava's praise to his spiritual master, who has opened my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge, and he feels obliged to help humanity by bearing the same torch. As a representative of the eternal Vaishnava Parampara, Abai wanted to shed the light of transcendental knowledge onto the field of the current crises. That had been the purpose of Back to Godhead, although since 1944 he had been unable to print the magazine. But even without the means to publish, Abai continued writing. His most ambitious project was the Gita Upanishad, his translation and commentary of Bhagavad Gita. Gandhi and others often spoke of the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. Indians never forgot their Gita, but most prominents did not teach it as Krishna had taught it. They would not recognize Lord Krishna, the speaker of their Gita, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but would extract his words as slogans to bolster their own philosophies. This is called, in the seventh canto, Narada Muni is describing to Yudhishthira Maharaj, Dharma bhado vidharma syat para dharma na choditaha upadharma tupakando dambova sabdabich chala. 5 types of irreligion, which are trotted out as real religion, and the Shabdabich Chala means word jugglery. They changed the meaning of Bhagavad Gita. So here it's being described by the author that so many Bhagavad Gitas, but they are misguiding and misconstrued. Therefore, they are useless. Whether political leaders, religious leaders, or scholars, they almost invariably made their own symbolic and allegorical interpretations. Abai wanted to present Bhagavad Gita as it is. It was to be 1,200 pages, 3 illustrated, beautifully bound volumes. For Abai, the books were already a reality from which he was separated only by time. Over the past 2 years, he had accumulated hundreds of manuscript pages. He wrote in notebooks and on loose papers, and then typed the numbered manuscript pages. He could never give the book his full time, but gradually it began to take shape. He also preached Lord Chaitanya's message through letters, writing to many leaders in the government, to respectable acquaintances, and to people whose articles he had read or whose activities had caught his eye in the newspaper. Presenting himself as a humble servant, he wrote to them of his ideas on how India's original Krishna-conscious culture could be applied as a successful solution to all manners of dilemmas. Sometimes his letters drew replies, and Abai would respond, fanning the sparks of interest wherever he found them. A well-known reformer, Mahendra Pratap Raj, was forming what he called the World Federation. Abai had read a news sheet which Mr. Pratap had published from Vrindavan, in which he addressed all nations and people of the world and called for a unity of mankind. So Prabhupada would say, they want Ram Raj without Ram. They want to have unity, but they don't know the formula. And then Prabhupada will quote the famous verse, Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Surida Sarva Bhutanam Getvamam Shantim Richati. Abai wrote to him suggesting that Lord Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita provided a theistic science capable of uniting all religions. Mr. Pratap replied in May of 1947, I admire your deep study of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I myself am a great admirer of the great classic. I assure you that I am working strictly according to the book. Mr. Pratap mentioned his book, Religion of Love, and suggested that Abai read it if he wanted to know the World Federation's view of religion. In the meanwhile, Mr. Pratap wrote, "I do not agree to your suggestion of making the name of Krishna or Govinda as the basis of the unity of religions. This would amount to conversion and won't lead to unity of religions. I highly appreciate your efforts in the direction of back to Godhead." Abai got the book, read it, and in July 1947, while he was visiting Kanpur, wrote a reply. He had traveled to Kanpur not as a spiritual teacher, but as a pharmaceutical salesman. Yet a typewriter had been available, and out had come his preaching. Prabhupada writing, "In continuation of my last postcard, I beg to inform you that I have finished the reading of your book, Religion of Love. In my opinion, the whole thesis is based on the philosophy of pantheism, and the approach is made by the services of mankind. Religion of love is a true religious idea, but if the approach is made through the service of mankind only, then the process is made imperfect, partial, and unscientific. The true religion of love is perfectly inculcated in the Bhagavad Gita. Besides, you have not quoted any authority for all your statements, so it is more or less dogmatic. If different men put different dogmatic views about religion and its essentials, who is to be accepted and who is not to be? Therefore, the approach shall be and must be authoritative, scientific, and universal." So Srila Prabhupada often mentioned to us that he didn't change one word of his predecessors' acharyas, that he didn't change anything. He gave it as it is, as given by his predecessor acharyas, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sridhar Swami, and so on. And we know in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Lord Chaitanya, when he was having a conversation with Vallabhacharya, Vallabhacharya said, "Sridhar Swami, his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's inarticulate. It's not chronological," he said. "Therefore, we shouldn't accept it." And Lord Chaitanya said, "One who does not accept the Swami or the husband is a prostitute." It's a Pumschali prostitute. So he criticized Vallabhacharya and curbed his false pride. Abai then gave a summary of the Bhagavad Gita in 10 points, concluding, "The highest service that can be rendered to mankind is therefore to preach the philosophy and religion of Bhagavad Gita for all time, all places, and all people." But extended philosophical dialogue was not usually the result of his letters. In 1947, when Abai wrote to high government officers of the newly formed government of India suggesting a remedy for riots, they turned him away. When he asked to talk with the governor of West Bengal, the governor's secretary replied, "His Excellency regrets that he is unable to grant you an interview at present, owing to heavy pressure of work." When he wrote to the Assistant Secretary to the Minister of Education, an assistant to the Assistant Secretary replied, "The government of India regrets that they are unable to accede to your request." Sometimes official interest took the form of a patronizing pat on the head. "I am sure your scheme for establishing peace will meet with response from our Prime Minister." And another, "He, the Minister of Education, is glad to see that you're taking to rout our communalism. He suggests that you get in touch with." A local official asked not to be seen. I thank you for all that you have written and the fine sentiments which you have expressed. It is no use arguing the matter, as I do not think that I can serve any useful purpose by joining the organization which you wish to set up. And therefore you need not take the trouble of seeing me. I wish you, however, all success. So as Prabhupada said, during the Swaraj movement, India was enthralled in nationalism, which is described by Rupa Goswami as upadi, or a misconception of who we are. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikena sevanam bhakti ruchate. So here the upadi is nationalism, but Bhaktisiddhanta would tell Prabhupada that so many leaders come and go, but devotional service transcend all mundane concepts of nationalism, socialism. All these various isms are known as upadis, or misconceptions. In October, after the Calcutta riots of 1947, Abai wrote to the chairman of the Rehabilitation Committee, who replied, "Regarding Hari Kirtan and Prasadam, you may make any program of your own, but I'm afraid that I am not interested in the same, nor my committee, and therefore there's no necessity of your meeting with me." Abai was fulfilling his role as a Vaishnava preacher, and the secretaries of the various government offices were recognizing and addressing him as such. But they could not appreciate his applications of the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and his suggestions for Hari Kirtan. Occasionally, however, someone seemed interested. Mr. N.P. Astana, High Court advocate, replied, "I'm very much obliged to you for your letter, your broad scheme about spiritual improvement. I thoroughly appreciate the fine feelings which have prompted you to write this letter and the kindness with which you have considered my query. I have been a student of Bhagavad Gita and have also imbibed some of its teachings, but I still lack a good deal and will be glad to be guided by a person of your accomplishment. You may kindly therefore send your scheme to me, on receipt of which I will be able to express my views." It was inevitable that Abai would think of engaging Mahatma Gandhi in devotional service because of his lifetime of courageous, ascetic, and moral activities on behalf of his countrymen. Mahatma Gandhi had great power to influence the Indian masses. As with Mahendra Pratap of the World Federation, Mahatma Gandhi's idea of serving God was to try to bring happiness to man through politics and through his own invented methods. As one Englishman had said of Mahatma Gandhi, he's either a saint amongst politicians or a politician amongst saints. Be that as it may, he was not as yet fully engaged in pure devotional service, and his activities were not those of a Mahatma as described in Bhagavad Gita. The Gita defines a Mahatma as one who fully engages in worshiping Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, always chanting his glories. The Mahatma encourages others to surrender to Krishna. But because as a young man, Abai had been a follower of Gandhi's, Abai had a special feeling for him. Of course, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had later convinced him to engage exclusively in devotional service. But now Abai felt his old friendship for Gandhi. Even though Gandhi was a towering figure of worldwide fame, and Abai unknown both to Gandhi and to the world. On December 7, 1947, Abai wrote to Gandhi from Kanpur. Gandhi was living at the Birla Mansion in Delhi, where large military forces throughout the city discourage Hindu-Muslim rioting. Gandhi's secretary, Pyari-Lal Nair, described Gandhi at this time as the saddest man one could picture. So, Gandhi was very sad, and ultimately he was assassinated by a Hindu. So this is the problem Rupa Goswami describes, and also Narada Muni describes, Pavarga. Pa, Fa, Ba, Baha, and Ma. The whole world is overcome by Pavarga, struggle for existence and disappointment, working hard, Parabhavas, working hard, foaming at the mouth, Fena. Ba, Byartita, means disappointment. And then Ba, Baya, fear, and then Mrityu, death. So this is the problem, that Mahatma Gandhi here is being depicted as a very, very sad man. The men he had led in the struggle for Indian independence, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and others, had taken the leadership of the nation. And Gandhi, with his doctrines of nonviolence, unity, and agrarianism, was now at odds with them in many ways. He feared that he was becoming an anachronism. His former colleagues admired him but rejected his leadership. All his programs, Hindu-Muslim unity, nonviolence, upliftment for the poor, although praised throughout the world, were failures in the India of 1947. On a recent visit to a Muslim refugee camp, a crowd of Muslims who surrounded his car had cursed him, and at a public prayer meeting, a Hindu crowd had shouted him down and ended his meeting. When he had attempted to read from the Quran, at 78 years, Gandhi was physically weak and melancholy. So the Hindu crowd had shouted him down because he was attempting to read from the Quran. In all likelihood, Abhai's letter would never reach him. Abhai knew it. Sending a letter to Gandhi would be like putting a note in a bottle and sending it out to sea. It would arrive in the flood of mail, and Gandhi would be too busy to see it, but Abhai sent it nonetheless. My dear friend Mahatmaji, please accept my respectful namaskar. I am your unknown friend, but I had to write to you at times. And again, although you never cared to reply them, I sent you my papers back to Godhead, but your secretaries told me that you have very little time to read the letters, much less for reading the magazines. I asked for an interview with you, but your busy secretaries never cared to reply this. Anyway, as I'm your very old friend, although unknown to you, I'm writing to you in order to bring you to the rightful position deserved by you. As a sincere friend, I must not deviate from my duty towards a friend like your good self. I tell you as a sincere friend that you must immediately retire from active politics if you do not desire to die an inglorious death. You have 125 years to live as you have desired to live. But if you die an inglorious death, it is no worth. The honor and prestige that you have obtained during the course of your present lifetime were not possible to be obtained by anyone else within living memory. But you must know that all these honors and prestiges were false, inasmuch as they were created by the illusory energy of Godhead called the Maya. By this falsity, I do not mean to say that your so many friends were false to you, nor you were false to them. By this falsity, I mean illusion, or in other words, the false friendship, and honors obtained thereby were but creation of Maya. And therefore they are always temporary or false, as you may call it. But none of you, neither your friends nor yourself, know this truth. There's a verse, I think, in the third canto. Ye Shuddhana Vachaste Vai Majanti Ashma Plava Eva means that foolish Ye Shuku Patadestrinam Patatam Tamasi Hiyadaya. The great leaders, they're like captains who lead their followers into a boat made of stone. Ashma Plava means a boat made of stone. So these foolish leaders, they're leading the masses of people, but here Prabhupada is saying they're influenced by the falsity of illusion. Therefore, they're leading them into a boat made of stone. Ye Shuddhana Vajaste Vai, they put their faith in foolish leaders who are like captains who are trying to navigate a boat made of stone. Ashma Plava Eva. So here Prabhupada is telling him you're actually, all your endeavors and all your attempts to create peace and harmony in India have failed because you do not know the science of Bhakti Yoga. Shrama eva hi kevalam, useless waste of time. A sadhu is not supposed to flatter but to cut. This is the basis of his friendship, that he cuts away the illusion of the materialistic person. Mahatma Gandhi, forsaken by his friends, bitterly disappointed at the outcome of the long, hard struggle for Indian independence, and apprehensive about the future, had been reduced to a position in which he might be able to realize that his friends and work were ultimately illusory. Thus, it was the perfect time for him to comprehend Abhai's message. Now, by the grace of God, that illusion is going to be cleared, and thus your faithful friends, like Acharya Kripanidhi and others, are accusing you for your inability at the present moment to give them any practical program of work as you happen to give them during your glorious days of non-cooperation movement. So you're also in a plight to find out a proper solution for the present political tangle created by your opponents. You should therefore take a note of warning from your insignificant friend like me, that unless you retire timely from politics and engage yourself 10% in the preaching work of Bhagavad Gita, which is the real function of the Mahatmas, Mahatsevam Dwaramahur Vimuktes, you shall have to meet with such inglorious deaths as Mussolini, Hitler, or Lloyd George met with. For years, Abhay had wanted to approach Mahatma Gandhi with this message. In fact, he had written before, although it had been of no avail, but now he was convinced that unless Gandhi got out of politics, he would soon die an inglorious death. So Jadabard speaks to Maharaj Rahugana in the 5th canto that one takes shelter of so-called friends, but sometimes these friends become enemies and crush the living being who is struggling in the forest of material enjoyment. So here Gandhi is struggling in this forest of material enjoyment where friends, relatives, they betray the struggling living entity and they end up in an inglorious death. That Gandhi was remaining active in politics rather than preaching devotional service put him in heed of a warning. Abhay was writing to save a friend. You can easily understand as to how some of your political enemies in the garb of friends, both Indian and English, have deliberately cheated you and have broken your heart by doing the same mischief for which you have struggled so hard for so many years. You wanted chiefly Hindu, Muslim unity in India, and they have tactfully managed to undo your work by creation of Pakistan and India separately. You wanted freedom for India, but they have given permanent dependence of India. You wanted to do something for the upliftment of the position of the Bungis, but they're still rotting as Bungis, even though you're living in the Bungi colony. They are all therefore illusions. And when these things will be presented to you as they are, you must consider them as God sent. God has favored you by dissipating the illusion you were hovering in, and by the same illusion you were nursing those ideas as truth. Abai dutifully attempted to inform Gandhi that there was nothing absolute within the relative world. Ahimsa, or nonviolence, must always be followed by violence, just as light is followed by darkness. Nothing is absolute truth in the dual world. You did not know this, wrote Abai. Neither you ever cared to know this from the right sources. And therefore all your attempts to create unity were followed by disunity, and ahimsa was followed by hinsa. Tad viginartam saguru mivabiga chet samit prani shrutyam brahmanishtam. So one must accept an enlightened, pure devotee of the Lord to come out of this world of illusion and dualities. Abai pointed out that Gandhi had never undergone the standard practice for spiritual advancement, namely accepting a bona fide spiritual master. Although Bhagavad Gita declares the necessity of accepting a guru in a disciplic succession, Gandhi was well known for listening to his inner voice and for extracting ideas from various writers like Ruskin, Thoreau, and mixing them with teachings from the New Testament and the Gita, hodgepodge. Had Gandhi approached the Guru, said Abai, he would not have become bewildered within the sphere of relative truth. In the Katha Upanishad, it is ordered that one must approach the bona fide Guru, who is not only well versed in all the scriptures of the world, but is also the realized soul in Brahman, the Absolute. In order to learn the science of absolute truth, so it is also instructed in Bhagavad Gita as follows. Tad vidhi pranipatina pariparshanena sevaya upadikshanti te ginam ginaninas tadvadarshinaha. But I know that you never underwent such transcendental teachings except from severe penances, which you invented for your purpose, as you have invented so many things in the course of experimenting with relative truths. You might have easily avoided them if you had approached the Guru as above mentioned. Shabbadev says, Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktes tamo dwaram yoshita shangi shangam. One must accept and take shelter of the great Mahatmas, the great devotees of the Lord. Mahatmanas tumam parta daivim prakriti marashritaha. Bhajanti ananyamanaso gyatva bhutarim avyayam. Recognizing Mahatma Gandhi's godly qualities and austerities, Abai requested him to employ his moral elevation for surrendering to the absolute truth. Abai urged him to get out of politics immediately. But your sincere efforts to attain some godly qualities by austerities, etc., surely have raised you to some higher platform which you can better utilize for the purpose of the absolute truth. If you, however, remain satisfied with such temporary position only, and do not try to know the absolute truth, then surely you are to fall down from the artificially exalted position under the laws of nature. But if you want really to approach the absolute truth, and you want to do some real good to the people in general all over the world, which shall include your ideas of unity, peace, and nonviolence, then you must give up the rotten politics immediately and rise up for the preaching work of philosophy and religion of Bhagavad Gita, without offering unnecessary and dogmatic interpretations on them. I had occasionally discussed this subject in my paper, Back to Godhead, and a leaf from the same is enclosed herewith for your reference. I would only request you to retire from politics at least for a month only, and let us have discussion on Bhagavad Gita. I am sure thereby that you shall get a new light from the result of such discussions, not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of the world at large, as I know that you are sincere, honest, and a moralist. Awaiting your early reply with interest, yours sincerely, Abhay Charan De. So, a few years ago, Brahmachari was distributing books in Los Angeles, and the President of the United States, ex-President Bill Clinton, he got out of his limousine, went up to the Brahmachari, and asked for Bhagavad Gita and gave a donation. Leader of the most powerful country in the world. And I have a picture of that photograph of Bill Clinton, who became a vegetarian, a vegan, and he was showing all the people, of course everyone was looking at him, and he was showing them, he said, you should read this book, Bhagavad Gita as it is, by Bhaktivedanta Swami. So there's still light at the end of the tunnel. There's still hope. If the world leaders, as Prabhupada is writing Gandhi, he's a world leader, if they can take seriously the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and his predecessor Acharyas, there's some hope for peace. In 1985, I was in New Delhi, and Gorbachev had visited. I think it might have been 87, I can't remember. And we were waiting for Gorbachev. He was in the museum, National Museum of India, and his wife had they had given her, said, you can choose any statue in here, and she chose the statue of Krishna. Very old murti of Krishna. And as Gorbachev was coming out of the museum, this godbrother of mine, Kirti Raj, he jumped out and he speaks Russian, but he's American. He said, this is for you. And Gorbachev got a Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. There was another time when Fidel Castro visited Delhi at that time, and one of my devotee friends from South America, somehow he got into the what do you call it, Raj Sab? The Raja Sab? Raja Sabha. Somehow he got in and he gave Castro a Spanish Bhagavad Gita. And Castro said, yes, I'll read it. And he said, this is spiritual communism, not material communism. Spiritual communism, isavasamidam sarvam. So that way, hopefully, some of the leaders, Prabhupada had great hopes for Gandhi, will take this message seriously. There was no reply, and a month later, Gandhi announced that he would fast until death unless India made a payment of 550 million rupees to Pakistan, a previous condition of the partition agreement. At first, Hindu refugees from Pakistan demonstrated outside Gandhi's darkened room chanting, "Let Gandhi die." But as he fasted each day closer to death, he aroused the heartfelt concern of the nation, and the government leaders repaid the money to Pakistan. It's a lot of money. Then great crowds approached him chanting, "Let Gandhi live." Meanwhile, Hindu-Muslim violence continued. It's nice to know that in the West, in where I'm from, Canada, we put bookshelves in stores. And sometimes I notice the Muslims will come and buy Prabhupada's books, And it's an honor system, so they leave a donation. So in Muslim countries, we're doing preaching as well, and many are becoming devotees. So Pritiviti Achiyata Nagaradigram. So everywhere, people are becoming, whether Hindu, Muslim, Christian, whatever, Buddhist, taking Prabhupada's books. On January 30th, the day after he had drafted a new constitution for the Congress Party, Gandhi took his evening meal, worked at his spinning wheel, then walked towards his evening prayer meeting, and was shot 3 times in the chest. He died crying out the name of God, "Hey Ram, hey Ram." Antakale chamameva smaran muktva kalevaram. The time of death, if you remember Krishna, you go to Krishna. Abai's letter of the previous month suddenly read like a prophecy, but it had not been read by the person for whom it had been intended. When the directors of the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial National Fund invited suggestions on how to commemorate Gandhi's life and work, Abai wrote to them and simultaneously to Vallabhbhai Patel, India's Deputy Prime Minister, proposing the Gandhian way to use the funds. Gandhi's whole life was dedicated to the service of humanity at large, with special interest for raising moral standards. His later activities showed that he was equal to everyone, and all the people of the world knew him more as a spiritual leader than a mere politician. Devotion to Godhead was his ultimate aim, and when I say that his sacred memory should be perpetuated not in the ordinary way, but in the Gandhian way, I mean that fitting respect to his memory will be done in the following manner. Srila Prabhupada, when he met Henry Ford's great-grandson, Alfred Ford, what's his name? Ambarish Prabhu. First thing he said to Ambarish, "So where is Mr. Henry Ford now? Where is he? No one knows. No one knows." So the 1 minute you're a great leader, and the next minute could be a dog in Stockholm. As Prabhupada mentioned that one astrologer in Calcutta said that Jawaharlal Nehru may have taken birth as a dog in Stockholm. Mudo yonisu jayate tatapralinas tamasa. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if you die in a mode of ignorance, tatapralinas tamasa, mudho jonisu jayate, you take birth in the animal species of life. That's all throughout the Gita, in the 14th chapter and 16th chapter. Krishna condemns people who live like dogs, hogs, asses, and camels. Although they're leaders, they're simply like dogs, hogs, asses, and camels. Svavid varahos takarai. Unfortunate. So the business, Srila Prabhupada is, by his example, is teaching by his example that we have to take all measures to deliver the souls, regardless of whether they're big politicians like Mahatma Gandhi, or Prime Minister of Russia, or Prime Minister of England, whoever they may be. Without this knowledge, without becoming Raj Rishis like Yudhisthira Maharaj, simply misguiding people and gliding down the pathway to the hell. Patanti Narake Sucho, 16th chapter. They glide down to hell. Unfortunate. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Patita Pavan. Abai wrote of a Mahatma Gandhi rarely described, Gandhi as a Vaishnava. Despite his pressing political activities, Gandhi had never missed his daily prayer meetings in the evenings. Even at the time of his assassination, he had been on his way to attend his daily kirtan. Abai stressed that it was because of Gandhi's regular participation in congregational prayer that he had been strong in his work to raise the moral standard of humanity. Gandhiji, minus his spiritual activities, Abai wrote, is an ordinary politician, but actually he was a saint amongst statesmen. Abai wrote that it had been Lord Chaitanya who had originated the congregational chanting of the names of Krishna and Ram, and his followers, the six Goswamis, had left a wealth of literature for discussion and understanding. The Memorial Fund Board should take this lesson from Mahatmaji's practical life and develop it on a large scale. Therefore, one fitting memorial to Mahatma Gandhi would be to institute daily congregational readings from Bhagavad Gita. When people's spiritual instincts were kindled by daily prayer meetings, then they would develop the highest qualities in their character. Abai had a second suggestion. Gandhi was known for his attempts to enable the lower class people to enter temples. And in Noakhali, he had installed the deity of Radha and Krishna for the ordinary man to worship. Although this was generally taken as a side issue of Gandhi's work, Abai took it as the essence that Gandhi's was a theistic movement. Abai explained that although there were hundreds and thousands of temples in India, they were not properly managed, and therefore educated citizens were neglecting them. In the original Vedic culture, the purpose of temples had been to nurture spiritual culture. If the temples of India could be reorganized as vital spiritual centers, then the disturbed minds of the day could be trained for life's higher duties. Such education and practice, Abai wrote, can help man in realizing the existence of God, without whose sanction, according to Mahatma Gandhi, not a blade of grass moves. Karmana daiva naturana jehu janti papati astriya pravishtumadarat. So by the hand of God, one's activities are being ordained in this life and the next. He also referred to Gandhi's Harijan movement, which most people saw as Gandhi's humanitarian effort to grant equal rights to untouchables, whom Gandhi had recognized as Harijan, people of God. Abai stressed that this was also an essentially spiritual aspect of Gandhi's life. But rather than simply rubber stamp an untouchable as Harijan, Abai argued there must be a systematic program for elevating people of the lower classes. This program was taught in Bhagavad Gita and could best be applied under the guidance of a bona fide devotee of the Lord. Striyo Vaishestata Sudras Tepiyanti Param Gatim. Abai volunteered to take up the work on behalf of the Memorial Board. If the board, in attempting to commemorate Gandhi's efforts and accomplishments, neglected the essential spiritual aspect of Gandhi's life, Abai warned his memory will soon be dead, as has been the lot of other politicians. What time do I stop? 5 minutes? Perhaps they saw Abai as another opportunist seeking money or a sectarian religionist. But Abai saw himself as a lowly servant of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Seeing certain Vaishnava qualities in the character of Mahatma Gandhi, Abai took the opportunity to introduce his spiritual master's message to the world. And by so doing, he paid tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, praising him as a great devotee interested in kirtan, temple worship, and elevating unfortunates to become people of God. While on business in Madurai, South India, Abai showed some of his writings to Muthuswami Chetty, another medical salesman. Mr. Chetty was impressed and felt he could persuade his wealthy friend, Dr. Alagappa, the famous Birla of the South, to finance the printing. In April of 1948, Mr. Chetty wrote to Abai saying that he had been prompted to help Abai for something God has meant. He asked Abai Charan to send him the complete Gita Upanishad manuscript so that he could present it to Dr. Alagappa in Madras. Mr. Chetty had already written Dr. Alagappa about the first-class work, Gita Upanishad, to cover 1,200 pages of royal size, and had urged him to publish it for the benefit of religious-minded people. He had also mentioned that Abai had been trying to publish the book since 1946. Dr. Alagappa soon replied to Mr. Chetty that he was interested, and Mr. Chetty wrote to Abai, "So I am on my way to help you, and only God must help me." As for talking business with Mr. Alagappa, there would be no need, since once he does it, it is for the sake of benevolence. Anticipating success, Mr. Chetty invited Abai to come to Madras to meet Dr. Alagappa. There he will arrange for what God has meant for you to do in your religious duty. In Madras, Abai would be able to check and correct the proofs of the manuscript and see the book through the various stages of printing. It was a big opportunity, and Abai was not one to miss an opportunity. If the book could be published, it would be a great victory in his mission to fulfill the request of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. But then the worst thing happened. The manuscript was stolen. It was the only copy, the one Abai was keeping safely at home. He questioned his family and servants. No one knew what had happened. Abai was baffled. So much work had been undone. He felt he had worked so many months for nothing. Although he couldn't prove anything, he suspected that his servant or even his son might have done it with a motive for raising money. But it remained a mystery. So I'll stop there. It's the bottom of page 156. So the next reading will be the top of page 157. Right there. Yeah, that's done. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.